Okay, let's learn some very, very basics of crochet. You've got your hook. This one is a 5mm USH. The millimeters, I think, has to do, I know it has to do with this. I don't know if it's the circumference or the diameter, but the higher the number, the bigger, and the letters go up the bigger you get. We've got a yarn here that is the correct weight for the hook, which is important, but not something we're going to get into right now. So I'm going to show you how to hold the hook, how to hold the yarn with your other hand, how to do a slip knot to get the yarn fastened to the hook, and then something called a foundation chain, which, as the name implies, is foundational to crochet. So we've got the hook. Let's move this off the side. We've got the hook first. I think there are two main ways to hold the hook, but if you watch videos, there are about a billion ways. So I'm going to teach you the way I know. Really doesn't matter as long as it gets the job done, but there does have to be some kind of a starting point. So I'm going to teach you how I hold it. So this is called, I think, like a knife hold, even though I don't think it makes much sense, but I think I figured out why it's called that. So a knife hold is you kind of hold it like you would if it were a knife and you were going to cut something. So the top finger, the pointer finger, doesn't necessarily stay here like you would if it were a knife, but the rest of the hand hold is kind of like a knife. People also do hold it like a pencil. I have not learned that technique, so I don't really know how to teach it. Again, there's millions of YouTube videos about this, and if you watch other people's, they hold them all different kinds of ways. But I'm going to teach you how I learned because it's easiest for me. So you want to hold your hand fairly loosely. That's another thing that you want to kind of learn how to do, is you don't want to grip it with a death grip, because then your tension, which is something I'll talk about in a second, will be very tight and your work will be very tight, and it's just not a fun way to crochet. So kind of loose, whatever. So like a knife, in case you didn't know what a knife does. Okay, so that's how you hold your hook. And this will move. You know, it doesn't ever really stay totally stationary, as does this hand. They both kind of move as you go. It's kind of like a dance. So then we've got the yarn, and you use your non-dominant left hand. I'm right-handed, so non-dominant for me is left hand, to feed the yarn onto the hook in order to crochet. So the first thing you need to know how to do is put a slip knot on your hook. So that's basically just connecting the yarn to the hook so it stays put while you crochet. Here's the easiest way I found to do it, because I feel like, I don't know, I can just do it all one motion, and I don't have to put my hook down, do a knot, pick it up, whatever. I just learned how to do it with the hook. So here's what you do. Actually, let me back up a second. I'm a great teacher. We're going to show you how to hold the yarn in your left hand. So again, there's a billion ways to do this. I'm going to show you the way I do it. If this isn't comfortable for you, you'll find your own way in time. The whole idea, again, like I said, about tension. So tension is the looseness or tightness of the yarn. And I'll show you when I have all this together, kind of how that can change and affect your project. But for now, we'll just show you how to hold it in a way that can kind of control the tension. So what I do is I take my pinky finger and lay the yarn tail over the pinky finger. The yarn is always feeding from the back of your hand. So think of your hand kind of as a needle on a sewing machine. It's always coming from the back. That's your working yarn. This yarn that's coming from the yarn ball is called your working yarn, I guess. I don't know. I think that's what people call it. So anyway, you take pinky finger, open it up, lay that over that. Okay? Give it maybe a little more length. So then what you do is you clasp that, close that up, open your pointer finger, like a little chomp, whatever, alligator, and you'll wrap that yarn tail over your two middle fingers and under the pointer finger. So basically you've just got like a little loop. So now both pieces of yarn are behind your hand. So now you want to take the yarn tail side and wrap it over your top pointer finger. And I like to have it usually at my top knuckle or above, or kind of in this area. I just find that easier. Again, I think over time you'll figure out what works for you, but that's how I do it. And then I'm also going to call these your pinchy fingers. So You've got either your middle and your thumb or your ring and your thumb, or both your middle and your ring and your thumb as your pinchy fingers. I kind of do that over here too, just because I don't want to have to use all the words to say middle finger, ring finger, thumb finger. So we're gonna call them pinchy fingers. So basically, once you have this set up, you will then take your pinchy fingers and hold the yarn here. So now if you feel like this tail is too short, you can kind of just pull and get a little bit more. In the beginning, this doesn't really matter because it's all about practice. All of this is the foundation of learning how to crochet. You're not gonna be perfect right away. It's totally fine. I've been doing this for years and I still have problems. So be easy on yourself and just think of this as a learning process. And if it doesn't fit for you, then it doesn't fit for you. So again, I'm just gonna show you how to wrap your hand one more time. So I'm gonna put this down. So you take your yarn, take your pinky and chomp it open, rest the yarn over it. Then you're gonna wrap, going this way, open your pointer finger. So you basically just have that, like a little ring on the inside of your two middle fingers. Then you'll take that tail, bring it back over the top pointer finger, kind of at that first knuckle or above, and then you'll chomp it. Oh, I keep saying chomp. Pinch it with your pinchy fingers. And so then basically what you have here is you have an upside down V or kind of an A shape that your hand is making the yarn form. So this is the basic form that you'll always use when you're crocheting or whatever you end up finding comfortable, because this is then how you feed the yarn onto the hook and into your project. So I'll get into tension in a second. Right now I'm just going to show you how to put a slip knot on your hook using your hook. Again, a lot of people do that with their hand or many different ways. I just like doing it right directly onto my hook because then I'm good to go. Again, it's all preference, it's fine. So you have your yarn here. I'm gonna call this the bad area. Around here, outside of the yarn, outside of your hand, ignore all this. You're not gonna be using this space. What you're concerned with is this space in between the two pieces of yarn. And you'll understand that in a second. So we're gonna put the hook into the good space. And this seems a lot more tricky than it actually is, and it's kind of maybe hard to see on camera. But what I do is I just take the hook and make kind of a clockwise motion with it so that it gets wrapped around once. It's not knotted, it's just wrapped. And then what you can do with your pinchy fingers is kind of just secure that, raise your top finger a little bit, and then what you'll do is you'll take your hook and you'll do what's called yarn over. So yarn over is, again, one of the things that is really talked about basically in every stitch in crochet. So it's very important to know what yarn over is, and which is why it's important to know what a chain does, because the main motion for a chain is yarn over. So before I do that, I wanted to point out, I usually keep this top finger kind of at a 45-degree angle to this finger. So 90 would be straight up. Let's all go back to math class. This is 45. So halfway between that. I usually keep it there because I find that that helps my tension. It's up to you again, but you kind of, and so tension is how loose or how tight the yarn is that's coming from your finger and from the ball or the skein. So I'll show you in a second why that's important. So let's go on with the chain. I give a lot of information because I feel like it might be helpful. If it's not, just ignore it and just do what you want. So we take our hook, go into the good space, we yarn over. So that's called a yarn over when the yarn comes up and around the hook. So the reason I say that about the good space and the bad space is I remember when I was first trying to learn how to crochet, I thought, well, I can yarn over this way. If you're just telling me to put the yarn over the hook, I don't know which way to go. So that's why, to me, I feel like if you ignore ever putting your hook in this space over here on the outside of the yarn, that will help kind of know where your hook is supposed to go. So you always want to go into this little space, kind of triangle between the two yarns. So we've got our loop thing, crossover, go into the good space, yarn over. So now your yarn is over your hook and you just pull it through. So that is one chain on your hook, basically. So now a foundation chain is just basically that over and over and over again. And eventually you'll have to count how many there are. Right now you are just practicing for tension, holding the yarn, holding the hook, and yarning over. So counting doesn't matter. What your end goal is trying to get a foundation chain that is consistently sized and that you feel comfortable with the motion of yarning over and pulling through. So you'll see when I have a few chains on my hook here, or a few chains done, is that my pinchy fingers are down here. So if I try to work, that might be kind of loose. So what I do is I move my pinchy fingers up here so that I have more control kind of what's going on. Again, that's personal preference, how often you want to do that. I wouldn't suggest doing it every loop because that will kind of make you very tight in what you're doing. Like you don't want to be all cramped up. I don't know if you're, you can't see, I just shrugged my shoulders. You don't want it to be super tight. Like if I take this finger and really tighten it up and this is super taut like a guitar string, and then I try to pull it and I'm pulling this and I pull this, it becomes very difficult and your project will suffer. Same thing if I go really loose and I'm all loosey-goosey, you know, I'm going to have really big chains and it's going to be sloppy. You probably can't tell comparatively. Maybe you can a little bit. So again, all of this is about feel. So I'm giving you basics so you can start to practice. However it works for you is fine. But this is the basics of how to start to practice a foundation chain. And I know it's boring and it's not sexy and it's not exciting. But as I said the other day, and to quote myself, if you want to learn how to write a novel, you have to know the alphabet first. So this is basically the alphabet of crochet, is this foundation chain, because you will learn the idea of how to hold the hook, how to feed the yarn, how to yarn over, and how to pull through, which is most of crochet. So just do this over and over and over again. And if you get frustrated or don't like how your hooks are or how your loops are turning out, all you have to do is take your hook out and just undo it. Because the good and the bad about crochet is it is just a bunch of loops that will come unraveled very easily if it's not knotted. So I'm going to do the whole thing over just a little bit more quickly, and then I will shut up and you can practice. So again, crochet hook in your right or dominant hand. You're going to take your yarn, and actually what you could do, nope, I screwed up. Never mind, ignore that. I'm just going to do it the way I always do it, is yarn over the pinky, yarn over the middle two fingers, and then back up over kind of at an angle on your pointer finger. Take your two pinchy fingers, pinch it here. And I also, wherever your pinchy fingers are, for lack of a better term, is kind of your working starting point. So this is your working area, kind of, and this is kind of where everything is originating. So I'll show you that when I do this. So to do the slip knot, again, you'll take your yarn, go into the good space, ignore all this space over here. This is the Wild West. You don't want this. Take your hook, put it into the good space, swirl it. You can kind of see how I did that with my hand. Oops, now I screwed up. Just kind of swirl it clockwise, and then I'm going to move my pinchy fingers to secure that. Also about tension is you kind of want this to be able to move freely. Again, this is the size of the crochet hook here, this neck part. So basically that will determine your stitch size. And so you always want it to be just touching, but not so loose that it's wobbly, or so tight that you're having a hard time moving it. So you want it just kind of touching and gliding on there so that it's nice, you got nice tension. So then once you have just that loop, we're going to finish the, whatever it's called, slip stitch. We're going to put our hook into the good space, yarn over, and pull through. And as you're seeing, it's okay that the yarn is going down here. You don't have to worry about the yarn going right up in the actual hook, because I think that's kind of tricky, because what'll end up happening when you pull this through is it eventually will catch. So don't be too stressed about where the yarn ends up hooking on your hook, as long as you kind of can keep a good tension. So again, I've done this for a very long time, so don't be discouraged if yours does not look like mine. But this is how I practiced and learned, is I just made a bunch of foundation chain. See, even I'm getting kind of slipped. I just did a bunch of foundation chains because I feel like it helps with everything you need to know about crochet to start. Because if you don't learn this, everything else is going to be really confusing and frustrating. I had one more thing that I wanted to say that I have now forgotten. Oh, is that, so like I said about your hands kind of dancing, is if you watch just my right hand when I do this, it kind of is going forward and going back and going forward and going back. And then if you watch just my left hand, it also sometimes goes forward and back. So again, that's all personal preference, how you want to get it done and what you end up finding the fastest and the quickest for you. There's no right way, as long as, and the yarn has kind of been used a lot, so that's why these are bumpy, because the yarn plies are starting to come apart. But you just want to have a consistent chain and get the feel of doing a foundation chain, that you get to the point where you feel comfortable doing this. Because again, everything kind of follows these same steps and these same movements. So if you get this, you're pretty good to start. So again, just keep working a chain as long as you want, as short as you want, and start over, whatever you want to do. We won't be doing anything with this chain. So if you want to make one that you're like, wow, that's really wobbly, and then do another one with another skein of yarn to compare for your own purposes, that's fine. Or if you just want to go, you know what, I'm going to rip it out and start over till I get it to the point where I like it, whatever you want. So I'm just going to do a few more. Again, I'm doing this kind of fast because I'm showing you kind of just the smoothness that you can get to eventually. And again, I've got some space here, so I'm going to move my fingers up. But if I do it slow, again, hook into the good space, yarn over, catch that with the hook, and pull it through. And it will kind of look like a braid a little bit. So that is it for the foundation chain and how to hold your hook and your yarn.